Good morning, everyone. It is December 21st, and I know some of you have been wanting my opinion on President Zelensky's visit to Washington, D.C. to give speeches in front of Congress, meet with President Biden, as well as other members of Congress. But before I get into that, first and foremost, I want to say that I'm absolutely disgusted by the actions of Republicans like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert for shunning President Zelensky. He is absolutely carrying on a legacy of what was a Republican icon in Ronald Reagan in countering bullies and countering authoritarianism in Russia. Reagan was a champion of that, just like many other leaders before him, to include Kennedy, who was obviously not a Republican, Eisenhower, etc. To stand there and not recognize that Russia is a threat to the U.S. and that us assisting and aiding Ukraine is in the best interest of the U.S. from a defensive standpoint and protecting our allies and partners in Europe is flat out disingenuous. These two are enabling Russia through their actions. They will be played on Russian media time and time again as the only sane ones in the Congress. Meanwhile, the rest of Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike, applauded Zelensky and what he's done. And really, they ought to be applauding him, because when you think about it, where we are, I mean, back in February, this address, him coming to Congress near Christmas, was pretty much unimaginable, even for me. A lot of us didn't think we would be where we're at. I thought, even though Russia was never the power it kind of presented itself to be, would still be able to defeat Ukraine. Clearly, that's not the case. I mean, we remember back in the day back in February, when the U.S. was trying to get Zelensky out of Ukraine, and he said those famous words, "I need ammunition, not a ride." And that's where we're at now. He got ammunition, and he showed the world what the Ukrainians are capable. And the world has watched as the Ukrainian people and their soldiers and all of the outpouring of their surrounding communities around, such as Poland, etc., resisting Russia's adventurism and Putin's want to absorb and commit genocide. And they've endured a huge amount of suffering, torture, rape, destruction of their cities and towns, and they continue to fight on and win. I mean, just kind of a quick review of what's been going on. You have Kharkiv and Kherson offensives, which show that the Ukrainians wouldn't just defend themselves, they wouldn't just corrode Russian fighting power. These offensives demonstrated that Ukraine could and would take back their lands. They would go in, fight, and take back the lands that have been stolen from them. And they continue to do that. And now President Zelensky, who's leading this free country that has resisted Russia and what was all of its might, is winning on the battlefield still. And he's spoken to Congress, and he's spoken to the president, and it's kind of incredible, given what we thought was going to happen, which was going to be a complete Russian steamroll of Ukraine. So talking about the speech specifically and what was said, and well, I guess before the speech, I'll talk about what he talked about with the president. And the president, what he said with the president it was more of a thought process in the way ahead, where he focused on things like not only diplomacy, but also intelligence gathering, also military actions, and the economic impacts. Those are all things that were critical from an executive level, and I'm glad that they all discussed those. And those are all real concerns for not only Ukrainians, but Americans and Europeans as well. And it seems that those were hashed out in a way that was satisfactory, in that we can continue to support Ukraine and ensure that at least Russia won't win. And I don't like that policy. I would prefer that we help Ukraine win rather than help them not lose. We need to not give them just patriots. We need to give them combined arms capability. This includes tanks. This includes aircraft, etc. I get the reasons why you don't want to seem escalatory, but the reality is Russia just continues to escalate and escalate. And if we don't stop them here, what are we going to do? Stop them in Moldova? Have to stop them in Poland? At some point, Russia's just going to have to be stopped. And that's where we're at. So, and Zelensky understands this. And he is, one thing that I really liked, and it's a point of pride, because yes, we're Americans and we are a supportive nation for many countries. We give more than any other country in the world, not only on a total basis, but often, depending on the country, in a per capita basis. We are a very generous nation, mainly because we have the resources to do so. And Zelensky in Ukraine, he expressed that Ukraine is hugely appreciative of the support they've received, and gave deep felt thanks. He said he linked the American sacrifices in the Battle of the Bulge, which was the last fight that Germany went on the offensive. And it was a winter battle. He linked it to those Ukrainians currently fighting in winter against the Russians. He showed appreciation to the American people, Congress, and U.S. administration, not only for the aid that's being provided from the government, but also the aid that's coming from charities is being flowing into Ukraine. And he was very thankful. He said that this war is a war on all democracies, and all democracies have an interest in it. He's correct. I mean, if we let things like this take place, we are complicit in allowing authoritarian bullies to run the world, and we cannot do that. And there's plenty of powerful authoritarian bullies out there, to include China, North Korea, Iran, etc. It doesn't matter whether, and he speaks about this, whether we have the security of wide oceans or not. He's correct. We have a vested interest in maintaining humanity and stability in America. And because of that, we need to make sure that Europe is secure. His third key message was talking about allies of Russia and Iran. They also need to be allies of Russia, such as Iran. They need to be stopped in their tracks in their countries, rather than stopping them from having Russia use their equipment. That's a tough thing to say, apparently. But I don't know how that works. Unfortunately, that would force Iran into the fight, and I don't know if the U.S. wants to necessarily get into that right now. But the other message is it's not a time for negotiations, and I agree. Putin keeps pushing forward this idea that he wants to negotiate. Well, you can negotiate when you are in a position of power and have taken what you've wanted. That doesn't mean that you are negotiating for what's right. And what is right, what the United States, Europe, and the Western communities backing Ukraine want, is a full exit of Russia, and that's to be completely expected. Zelensky went on to talk about the battle can't be frozen or postponed. The Ukrainians have the upper hand right now on the battlefield, and he's absolutely right. So the idea is, we must continue to keep the pressure up. And Zelensky, that was his fourth point. Continued assistance will be needed. And he talks about the Battle of Saratoga, comparing it to the Battle of Bakhmut, as a turning point in the war. That Battle of Saratoga was a turning point for the Americans. The Battle of Bakhmut could be a turning point for the Ukrainians if they can finally beat back the Russians, but it will take time, it will take equipment, and it will take additional resources and intelligence from the U.S., which it seems we're willing to provide. The most important thing that Zelensky was calling for was that support, potentially to even increase the support against Russia. And I said this again, I don't think it's time for us to kind of stagnate or back off. I think it's time for us to enable Ukraine to win this war, not just not lose it. And Zelensky's in that same position. He was keen on addressing some of the concerns about some of the Republicans, where they were talking about, specifically from Matt Gaetz, who wants to audit. And he said there is an absolute accountability on the ground there. And actually, I have counterparts that I know of that are accounting for this stuff in Europe, and I fully believe that there is an accountability. These types of speeches are necessary. This type of aid is not charity, and he talks about it not being charity. It is a donation to global security. It is securing democracy. And the reality is we spend so much money on defense to counter two potential foes, Russia and China. So giving $100 billion out of our nearly $800 billion budget seems like a pretty good investment when American lives are not being lost. Unfortunately, Ukrainian lives are, but that aid and that support definitely meets the goals of what the U.S. is trying to do in countering a Russian aggressive state and Putin himself.